We finally reached the final step of binding our quilt. My pattern calls for 2¼ inch strips of binding. A lot of people use 2½. I like a thinner, skinnier binding, so you can really use 2½ if you want, or 2¼ But you take 2 of your strips and sew the ends together so that they look like this, and then you're going to sew those strips together so that it looks like one giant long strip of 2½ inch or 2¼ inch binding. Then we're going to take that long strip, fold it over, so like wrong sides together, which I'll show you in a second what that means. And we're just going to iron it flat to make it thinner than the 2½ or 2¼ inch strip. It'll now be like a 1 1/8 inch strip. So wrong sides together means that these ugly seams, we're going to fold them in on each other so that you won't see them. So just make sure that you're ironing them in the right direction so you don't see those nasty seams. Once you've gotten to the end of your binding strip, we have to attach it to our quilt now. I like to attach it to the backing first, so pin it to the side with the rough edges facing out. Give yourself a nice 6-inch gap before you start sewing, and then use your 1/4 inch foot again to sew all along the sides. When you get to the corner, leave your needle in, rotate the quilt, and then sew right into the corner. So stop a 1/4 inch before you get to the bottom and then sew into the corner like this. Then you just have to fold back that corner right to the edge and then sew along the bottom edge again, starting a 1/4 inch below that corner. Keep going all the way around your quilt until you're back to the original side, but leave a good, at least 1 foot gap from where you started sewing your binding. We should have a decent overlap at this point, but we need to make a very specific amount of overlap for this to work. So cut a little piece off the end of your binding, and the width of your binding, like the 2¼ inches, is exactly how much overlap we want between our strips. Then take your top strip and watch this carefully, fold it over so that it looks like this. So the right side is up still. Then take your bottom binding and kind of unfold it and put it so that they are now right sides together in this orientation. We're going to pin that and then sew along this diagonal, and that's going to give us a nice clean diagonal edge. It should look something like this when you are done. You'll know you've done it right if you have a nice diagonal seam like this. Then just cut off that excess and then sew this last 1 foot of binding onto the back. Then we just flip the quilt over and then flip the binding over to the other side and pin it. We're just going to sew along that edge. I use just a regular foot for this, not a 1/4 inch foot. I fold my corners like this so that I have a nice little clean edge, and then you just go all the way around your quilt and you're done your binding. Congrats, you finished your quilt.